We really need to talk about biblical slavery. Hello, everyone, and welcome to That Christian Nerd channel. Today, we are going to be doing the first installment of our series on biblical slavery. I think that this is a very important topic to talk about, and there are several things that I want to talk about as this series continues on. But today, we're just going to have an introduction to the series as well as some clarifications and some of the things that I want to see from this series. One of the hardest things to understand when it comes to the Bible is what it says about slavery. I've actually been struggling with this topic for a while, but what exactly have I been struggling with? Well, let me make you aware of some Bible verses and a series of questions in order to kind of help you understand what the issue might be. One example is Leviticus 25, verses 44 through 46, where we're told male and female slaves should come from other nations. Israel is told that they can hold these slaves as property and that they can be passed down to their children as inherited property to be, and I quote, slaves for life. Another verse that might be surprising to you is Ephesians 6, verses 5 through 8, where we're told by Paul that slaves should obey their earthly masters with respect and fear. And just as a final example, we are told by the Apostle Peter that slaves should, in reverent fear of God, submit themselves to their masters, those who are good and those who are evil. Now, this raises up a whole host of questions like, do you believe that slavery is wrong? Well, I'm assuming that most of the people watching this video are going to say, yeah, slavery is wrong. It's like, okay, well, then what do we do with these passages? And furthermore, what would we do with other biblical doctrines like the doctrine of inerrancy, which would say that the Bible is infallible or is perfect in even its moral teachings, and yet it has things like this? What would we do, for example, as Protestants who would hold the sola scriptura, the idea that the Bible is the sole infallible rule of faith, morals, and practice? How can it be the infallible rule of faith, morals, and practice for the church when it seems to command such immoral teachings like slavery? This issue is really important, and it has actually caused a lot of people to lose their faith. It is one of the many things, particularly about the Old Testament, that has caused many to lose their faith. And if you are unsettled, I understand, and that is completely fair because I too was unsettled, and I have been studying for months and months and months on this topic, trying to get an understanding of what is going on here and what we can do with this as Christians, and even what non Christians can do with this. Like I said, I'm going to make a series of videos covering this topic, but first I want to get some things out of the way. So, one of the things that I want to note about this series is that I'm not just doing it to defend the Christian faith. That's not the primary goal. I'm really going to have one video touching on a defense of the Christian faith in light of these sorts of things. Really, a lot of this series is going to be understanding biblical slavery, both for the believer and for the unbeliever. In order for both sides to know what they're dealing with, we're both going to have to understand the text. And I'm going to try my best to give an accurate representation of the text and what's going on in order to be able to discuss this subject properly. The second thing I want to note is that discussions between believers and non believers when it comes to this issue can actually get really heated. There can be yelling and insults and so on. And it's really, really sad to see. But I want to play a clip of just one example of how this kind of discussion between believers and non believers can get.
Out chasing. So, Michael, going back to the point here, okay? I already brought up the pets. As far as the job goes, my friend, in the NFL, these human beings are owned by owners. In the NBA, they're owned by owners.
I'm not a professional football player.
Oh, hold on a minute. You don't say anything about that. You don't say there's anything wrong about these owners referring to themselves as owners with these players. You don't say anything about the prison system. You keep ducking and avoiding this.
We talked about the NBA,
You're done.
Professional sports.
You're done.
Jim, so
yeah,
no
Jim,
more,
just
about
before,
prisons.
yeah.
Let's go back to the point from Jim.
I'm using it as an analogy.
Yeah. Shut up. In Black History Month, to compare pet ownership and being paid billions of dollars to throw a fucking ball through a hoop to the chattel slavery. That just disgusts the fuck out of me, and I'm done. That's all I got to say.
And my response to that is this: since this is Black History Month, sir, and your ancestors enslaved my people in the United States, how dare you question me on whether or not I know anything about slavery?
Well, you clearly don't care because you're comparing it to owning a fucking pet.
Sir, I'm talking about the topic as a whole. You are.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about slavery as a whole. You want to conflate all of it? That includes that, buddy.
Sir, you're clout chasing, sir, and I don't think you're taking the conversation.
No, I'm not clout chasing. You're an idiot.
Successfully defended the Bible. And when I brought up my analogy, you wanted to try to say that I was conflating or whatever. I was not. I bring up an analogy. If you were truly against slavery, you would be against the prison system. And everybody.
I am against slavery. Okay, that doesn't mean that I'm against pet ownership. Like, do you really think that there's any sort of common ground there?
What about slavery? Are you in the Bible? Slavery for punishment is in the Bible. You have a problem with that, but you don't got a problem with it in our modern day today.
Slavery for punishment. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on anything specific that you just heard. The point is that these debates can get pretty heated. So I want to avoid that as much as possible, and I want to take a calm and respectful approach, recognizing and understanding the very valid concerns and objections that really everyone has if they would think about what they're reading here for a moment. And I want to be able to deal with them in a kind, considerate, and virtuous way. Real quick, I also want to talk about how apologetics fail. And I'm not just talking about apologetics from the Christian sphere, I'm really talking about apologetics as a whole. Atheists and Christian alike surrounding this issue. And one of the things that I want to kind of nip in the bud right now is the suggestion that me or others are a slavery apologist. A lot of Christians, and I would say the best arguments that Christians have surrounding this issue, actually doesn't defend slavery in the Bible. Not in the way that you might think, not in a way of saying, well, it was actually a good thing, and let me explain why. That's not necessarily the case. A lot of Christians have more nuanced and different arguments to where that's not something that they have to say or would say. So I don't think that calling me or anyone else a slavery apologist is really going to be fruitful in a conversation if we're going to have a conversation between our two respective sides. With that being said, on the other hand, I also want to make sure that Christians are not acting like this is a dumb objection to the Bible or the Christian faith, and nor are we not having this triumphalist mentality to where, as if we have defeated this argument, we have kind of triumphed over the major moral hurdle of the Bible. I don't want us to have that kind of attitude either. There are a lot of other things we could go to in that regard. I do think that a lot of apologetics surrounding this issue has been really weird, really bad, and very dishonest on both sides, but more specifically on the Christian side. And as a Christian myself, I think it would be fair to admit that. In conclusion, this is a series dedicated to the exploration of slavery in the Bible primarily, while opening the door for the exploration of other avenues that are relevant to the topic. I hope that whether you are a Christian, atheist, anything else, you would be able to appreciate this series and the work that I have put into this, and I hope that it helps you in some way. Let's take a good and virtuous deep dive into these topics and struggle with this together and come to conclusions together. Thank you so much for joining me for the first episode in this series, and I hope you would be back for the second, where we zoom out and talk about slavery in the ancient Near East. Thank you.